Hey guys, Thomas Jr. here, aka Mustached, and welcome to my review of The Lost City. If you end up enjoying my full review, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out the links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord, second to my Patreon, third to my PayPal. Any donations are greatly appreciated to help support me and the channel. So, shilling will be reminded at the end of the review. And with all that out of the way, let's get into The Lost City. Now, I did originally plan to review this a bit sooner, but Elden Ring and Albion are the two main games that I've been focusing back on and forth with my first Patreon supporter, trying to figure that game out and finalize the steps on that. And just being engrossed in Elden Ring. So I figure I might as well review this when I could review this movie back to back with another movie I just watched. So that'll be that. Anyway, let's get into it. So this movie starts off with a writer using her imagination. Loretta, I believe her name is. In this fantasy that she's imaging up, and it turns out that this is all a part of her persona of wanting to write and write a book. So she is in this world, she is a dedicated bestseller of a raunchy-esque adventure series, I suppose, based on the content later on. We also, really early on, find out that she had a passing husband, and that's why she has become a recluse, but her bookseller or book helper got her back into just making an appearance at the very most. This is where we see Dash introduced, and all the while they do their little meetup. So as they get to the little meetup place, after the fact, she's taken by two men in a car, and Mr. Abigail, this self-proclaimed finder of treasures, introduces himself, and this ancient paper, based off of her work, off her fantasy. Apparently it was also based off of some reality. There was some reality embedded in her story, which, for writers, that just from an insider perspective, it does make sense. One thing I've been told as a writer is that you often write what you know, and you write things that are based on, like, things that happen around you, so that does make sense. Anyway, so she gets taken, and in the regards of that, her partner Dash calls in for reinforcements, gets this guy named Jack Trainer, and they get support from Beth and Ellison in the background as these sort of background characters. And so we cut back to Loretta, the writer, who is being taken further and further away. And thus, Ellen meets up with our friend Jack, who sets them up to move them out, and proceeds to, once they get there, start to take out the guards in a very action-packed. He's very competent at what he's currently doing, able to take out two more guards very effectively and have him sort of be distracted by the accompaniment of Alan there. However, As after the fact, after the camp blows up, or parts of it do, Ellen gets shot down, or sorry, Jack Trainer gets shot down. I mixed up their names in my notes a little bit there. So it is up to Ellen and Loretta, now the two of them back on their own, to try to make it out. Unfortunately, their car is destroyed. So they try to, the police, while this is happening, try to figure out what's going on with the other three, or the other two. So the phone is also broke, so it's up to them to try to get to a safe place. Ellen and Loretta walk in the forest on foot. They start to hear voices, and they lead themselves into the water, where we see the scene that played in every trailer where he has the leeches on his back. He gets them off, admires his ripped bod. They climb up after being almost being surrounded, and in the process, Loretta manages to make a fire, and she teases him in a sense that she probably doesn't even realize, where she's like escapade, like he tells her to like talk to her like in the books or whatever, something along those lines, but it's only escalating their romantic feelings for one each other in that regard. So after they make their way, they get into a small town where they are indeed helped out. But she is taken again after the fact in the next morning by the bad guys that catch up to her. And Alan catches up on a motorcycle, and they try to just dance around the situation after dancing in this little party that they were, not too, or getting all caught up in. Anyway, so she sets up a flame when she's caught in the little bus. My notes are a little scattered because I don't think I caught everything or I wrote every detail. Essentially, Ellen, when she's captured, fights outside, and she's sort of like goofing off inside, but in a way that tries to help her. But he eventually gets like caught in with her. So they're forced to essentially help with the final treasure, only to find out that the treasure, of course it was something that had nothing to do with money, and in fact it had something to do with love, which threw off the main bad guy here. They get trapped in the coffin. However, one of the guards saw this and decided to help them up as he left behind. With that, they are able to escape, and they swim out. And once they swim out, they arrest the other guy, the main bad guy. And with this, their adventures now laid to rest. They get caught on the boat and they get rescued, which leads to their new book, and our main companions kiss one another, because of course they do, and that was The Lost City. In terms of this feels like it's trying to purposely mix a lot of different movies we've seen before into some, into being that sort of purposeful parody type movie. But I don't know, I feel like a part of it does play it a little bit too safe. If, like, the most egregious thing that happens is, like, the leech thing from, like, that's as absurd as it gets. And, it tries to be that whole action movie for, like, a little bit toward the beginning, and then I feel like the goofiness, because it's obviously attempting to be a comedy, plays it relatively safe, which I find odd. And I guess, like, the whole book thing, using it as a poorly designed decoy to, like, where the bad guy's like, yeah, I'm just gonna capture you because you're related to someone who was, like, an inventor or whatever. I feel like, yeah, it does purposely kind of play on the whole idea of, like, this person who had training in something or other, and in this case they end up getting the wrong person, or someone at least side related to that in a way. And I feel like, again, because of these things, I think, like, it definitely plays itself a little bit too safe as soon as that character dies. As soon as the Jack Trainer character dies, is that they play it too safe. Which is weird, because the whole idea of the whole fetish book or whatever, I don't know, I think I was expecting a lot more raunchy material because of that in its nature of what the book was about, but even that, they kind of play it safe. Like, I was expecting some, like, 50 Shades of Grey kind of commentary, like, mocking that a bit and going on that little journey later on. But they don't, it's not quite that. The adventure, as I mentioned, is only toward the beginning, and then everything else past that point is sort of, again, safe-ish. Yeah. And in terms of writer stories, I think I've seen this type of story before, where it's like, oh, like a writer who's been bent out of shape or whatever. And of course, it's someone who's already successful. So it's a little bit derivative in that sense. As someone, I mean, I suppose that's more of a subjective thing that irritates me, is like, as someone who's a writer who's never gotten noticed before in terms of just their writing stuff, it is always kind of annoying to hear these stories of, like, oh, the already successful writer's in a slump, womp womp, and then that character has to learn, like, that, the people who admire and became the fan of the thing became that, those fans for a reason. Not so surprisingly, a more heavy, lean toward a female audience within the aspect of the book, which, again, I'm gonna say that doesn't really surprise me that they chose to do it. Again, I think that's a little bit of a dig at Twilight as well. And again, that's like another thing you could have taken, because I think, if I remember correctly, like, 50 Shades of Grey was like an offshoot of, like, what Twilight was, except, like, they were inspired by that story, and then they made their own, like, crazier fan fiction of, like, this guy or whatever. So, again, that doesn't really surprise me that much. And, in terms of everything else, yeah, relatively safe. And that's all I gotta say about it. I think the character work is very, even the relationship stuff feels a little bit like I don't even necessarily buy all of it. It feels like more of the scenario is helping their relationship more than they're trying to figure out if they're in a relationship, if that makes any sense. And I suppose that I suppose technically speaking that could happen in reality, but I feel like their chemistry still doesn't, even when they kiss at the end, it didn't feel like that was earned in any way, if that makes any sense. If that was built up in a way that we're like, yeah, I can see, instead of saying, I can see why they would end up together. And here, in this movie, I'm like, I don't think I buy it, honestly. I feel like they would stay as they were before, based on the content of, yeah, he was crushing on her before, but I don't know, I felt like she very clearly was more leaning towards the alive guy that dies in this movie, and then it almost feels like she's just kind of got lent towards him through the escapades rather than any sense of oh, we're actually connecting here. And maybe there's maybe one minor thing of he gave her a thing that she really needed in a moment where she needed it, and I guess that might have just stuck with her. Outside of that, I think that's the only instance where I can think of where yeah, he did something that's pretty cool, and that might have just stuck with her throughout that adventure, maybe. So yeah, that's where I would lean. In terms of a score, I'd probably give it a 4 or 5 out of 10. I'd probably stick with a 5, as well. I can't say there are many, I feel like playing it too safe doesn't do it any favors in that regard. And again, the character work is a little bit too shoddy for me to say anything definitively higher. In terms of plot stuff, I suppose it's a little bit wonky, but I can't really point to any specific scene where I'm like, well, that's just broken or something like that, but still not necessarily the best, but again, just sort of an in-between sort of movie. So that's my full review of The Lost City, and if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also, make sure to check out those links in the description. One has over to my Discord, second to my Patreon, third to my PayPal. Any donations help support me and the channel, and until next time, everyone, bye-bye!